Right then, well, welcome everybody. Good of you to turn up on such a lousy afternoon. This is the first of two sessions today. We have done sessions on other days, but I think possibly the lack of attendance this afternoon will be made up for this evening, when they're more likely to get people coming home from work, being at 6 o'clock. So the situation with regarding to the budget is not working. Peter, it was, and it's no, it's not.
The machine's frozen, is it?
Yeah, is it frozen?
Hang on.
I can do it by touching the screen, Pete.
It will work.
Yeah, I'll carry on. I'll do it by touching the
I was doing by touch.
yeah, by touch. For some reason, this machine keeps going into tablet mode, and I don't know why it's doing it. Okay, so in the last 5 years, we've been battling with ever increasing reductions in the amount of support that the authority gets from Welsh Government. And we've taken, as you can see there, some £15 million worth of additional pressures and delivered £23 million worth of savings over that period. And there is a clear expectation that austerity for public services will continue. There have been slight liftings of it over the last couple of years, but principally we're still in a period of cuts in the amount of funding that we're getting from Cardiff Bay. And it's not just Cardiff Bay, but our funding comes from Cardiff Bay, so they're the ones that we keep on referring to. And there was a very disappointing provisional settlement. Subsequent, we've had the final settlement. It always comes in two stages. And on the provisional settlement, we suffered a 1% cut and some reductions in additional grant funding. That was subsequently altered to a 0.5% cut, but we also got the additional public sector pay award that was loaded on top of that. So that did give us quite a substantial additional liability. And as you can see from that slide there, we're still the bottom of the league with regards to funding. If you look to the right-hand side of the slide, that blue line that falls substantially short of the red one is Monmouthshire. And you'll see from that the amount that we get per head of marginally under £1,000 compares starkly with just under £1,600 per head that Blaenau Gwent Council get. So if we had that level of funding, we'd have some additional £55 million, and we wouldn't be having the conversations that we're having today. The red line is the Welsh average, and so we even fall considerably short of that. As a result of only getting around 70%, just over, of our income from the revenue support grant. We have to get more from raising charges, and part of those charges, of course, is council tax. So the fact that we get so little per head to run the authority from government in Wales is the reason why Monmouthshire has to collect so much through council tax. And we originally modelled an increase of 3.75 in our calculations. We're now proposing that we go to 4.95 as a result of these additional pressures that have been put on us. And, well, not just as a result of that, but we've got to do a lot more to cope with that. But one of the ways that we're dealing with it is to suggest to Council on the 1st of March, which is the date that it will be set, that we increase council tax by 4.95%. That will be the Monmouthshire County Council element of council tax. You may be aware that council tax is made up of several elements. It's the police precept, the town and community council's precept, and us. So our bit will go up by 4.95. Indications are that the police will be more or less the same, and some town and community councils have decided to take on additional responsibilities and increase their precepts accordingly. But if you like to look at the letters down the side of the bands and pick up your property, you will be able to see from the right hand side what the actual increase in the MCC element of your council tax will actually mean to you on a weekly basis. So just to pick up Band D, because that's the one that's always quoted, a Band D household will pay an extra £1.13 a week as a result of that increase. So the modelling that we did when we were trying to work out where we should be with the budget created a gap of some 4.8 million. So we had to set out how we were going to deal with that, and the next couple of slides will give you some indication as to where we went with that. We had the base budget, but on top of that we had additional pressures. We get additional pressures every year, and this year is no exception to that. And there was some 2.8 million that we built in, knowing that we would have to spend that additional money, whatever else we did or wherever else we got it from. And we set about looking at savings, and we managed to work out how we could make £3 million worth of savings to help us cope with that 2.8 million. So the pressures that we looked at were the fact that we have an ageing population. Demographics in Monmouthshire indicate that we have a very substantially increasing elderly population, not just over 65, but in particular over 85. And inevitably, with people of those ages, we get an awful lot of social care pressure, and obviously, particularly in adult social care, as I was saying. Schools, in the last couple of years, we've flatlined our funding to schools, but that wasn't really flatlining, in that we also had to require them to take on additional responsibilities. So even though we maintain their funding from here at a constant level, unlike other departments who had substantial cuts, schools still had to bear the burden of some additional costs. This year we're doing everything we can still to flatline, but not pass on additional costs. So Cabinet has agreed that we'll be taking on those pressures as much as we possibly can, so that school balances don't suffer any more than they need to. Monmouthshire County Council pays the living wage, and we will continue to do that. And it's the enhanced version of the living wage that we actually pay. And as I'll come on to another slide, not only do we do that ourselves, but we also make sure that contractors that we get in, like care homes, also have sufficient funding to make sure that their staff are paid accordingly. We continue to drive for service efficiency, and we look very closely at our income generation to try and make sure that we're current with charging, and that we deliver as much into the budget as we possibly can from external sources. But overall, the whole idea behind all of this is so that we can maintain all local services. We are firmly of the view that once you cut something, it's gone and it doesn't come back. That doesn't mean to say we won't deliver it differently. We might even curtail, but we've not actually got rid of any of the nearly 700 services provided by Monmouthshire County Council. But I do acknowledge that a lot of them are being delivered in a different way. So the pressures are there for those who want to see the amounts, and you see there that there's another 675,000 required in children and young people. Social care and health has had increased funding of some 1.1 million, and the various other departments are identified by us monitoring the current year. We can see pressures developing. So what we do is we make sure that that we reflect in the next year's budget as much as we possibly can of the pressures that have built up in this year, so that we've effectively dealt with them. And there is a line.
Can I just say that the table is very difficult to read? Will there be copies available?
We can make copies available, yes. If you'd like to see Abby, who's in the front there, after, or Rian, they'll arrange that for you. Yes, Val? Can you put your mic on, please?
Beg your pardon. You get a much better view, gentlemen, if you sat in the row behind, because I can read from this angle. You've got a really good view of this screen.
Yeah, if you want to move closer to a screen, but by all means do. Yeah, you could do that. If you don't mind, as we are live streaming, I'll carry on, but please, while I'm doing that, you move to a better position. And you'll see there unidentified pressures. Those have all been mopped up now. We always know when we're planning these things that things are going to come out of the woodwork, and we built in a contingency for that. That contingency isn't there anymore. It's all been used up. And so we have new responsibilities around children with additional learning needs. That amounts to some 121,000. There's extra burden in respect of school exam fees at 167,000. We've built in a 1% pay award for schools. At the moment, that is the pay award awarded to schools nationally. We don't know if that situation will be retained, as other public sector workers have now had a 2% rise. So we're holding our breath there. And I mentioned earlier on about the national living wage and care home fees. That's some 434,000, and as I said just now, that's to make sure that our residents that are looked after in care homes are looked after by staff who are at least paid at that level. We've got various other pressures that there in respect of social capital and children's services. Additional responsibilities with regard to safeguarding, but particularly in regard to looked after children. And that item there about the Monmouth pool rebuild, 146,000, that's our anticipation of the money that we'll lose in revenue during the period where the leisure centre is totally reconfigured. There's additional pressure in the private leasing of houses to try and stop people having to go into bed and breakfast accommodation when they present as homeless. And there's additional monies required in waste, because the waste management grant that has helped us and other authorities in maintaining our level of recycling has been cut by government in Cardiff Bay, and again a reduction in the housing benefit grant has also put additional pressures on. We have increasingly more pressures in ICT because more and more things are becoming computerised. digitisation is the only way that we can contain a lot of our costs. And other things like insurance premiums going up, well, aren't they for all of us? In terms of savings, we've also managed, in addition to the additional pressures that we're arranging for the funding of, we, as I said on that earlier slide, had to find some £3 million worth of savings, and that slide there sets out the amount of savings that are required there. Those savings will be in respect of reconfiguring services. We're not taking money away from the people who are receiving the benefit of those services. We're saving money by doing things more efficiently and targeting the assistance to where it's actually required. So, for instance, if you provide a service in case somebody needs it, that's quite expensive. If you provide the service that somebody does actually need and provide it in the way that they need it, that is far more efficient and considerably cheaper to do. So by targeting so that the people in need get the service that they need, we've actually managed to save money, and that table there says the areas in which we've managed to save that £3 million. And if you want a little bit of detail, we're looking at schools working together in clusters. Do they all have to have? We've got just over 30 schools. Does each school have to have its own structure, or can schools that are close to each other, can they get together and make some savings? There are further pressures in regards of transformation of children's services, car parking, grounds waste, and various other items that have all come together to achieve that £3 million worth of savings that I was talking about. So the draft proposals led to a small shortfall of some significance, particularly when you take into account the monitoring at month 7, because we did have that situation where we'd identified further pressures from those that we'd originally envisaged, and they amounted to some £1.6 million, so not insignificant. But along with the final settlement came the 2% pay award, and that's added another 1.3 million to the pressures that we actually had. So we were hoping that we'd have some recognition of rurality. We get virtually nothing for deprivation, and we get virtually nothing to reflect the fact that we're a county. We might not have as large a population as some, but we're spread out over a very large area, and we've got some 1,600 kilometres of road. Just maintaining that is a major task, and we're inevitably looking at further proposals to meet the increasing gap, because we've got since that we've been looking at having to save another nearly 3 million, another 2.8 million, made up of those pressures. And we are currently looking at additional ways that we can sort that out. We're looking at procurement, we're looking at the way that we buy things, we're looking at the framework agreements that we've got with companies, other authorities, government bodies, to look at, are we buying our goods and services in the most efficient way? You can have a child put in your care instantly by a court, and a lot of the children that come our way that have to be supported have additional learning needs. Not only them, but there are children within the normal population that have those additional needs. So as a result of that, we're looking at the way that we deal with those. Some children, because of their learning needs, can cost us anything up to £250,000 a year. just for that individual child. And a lot of the provision is external to the county. By looking very, very carefully at in-county provision, we're finding ways of tailoring on an individual basis. Again, like the elderly population, we're providing services to children on an individual basis. We're finding ways that we can actually reduce the amount of those external placements. We're looking very hard at community and home-to-school transport. We're sure that there are additional savings that can be made there, and looking at further provision of safe routes to school. Our fees and charges, again, I mentioned earlier on that we always try and be as commercial as we possibly can with that, and we're looking very hard at what we charge for the services we provide that aren't covered by the revenue support grant. Grants, not as plentiful as they used to be, but more and more grants come up from different bodies all the time, and we're looking constantly to make sure that we take advantage of the grants that are available when they are available. We're looking at opening and closing times of waste facilities, possibly of other facilities where we're open but very few people turn up. Can we save costs by only opening during the periods where people do turn up? That's what a commercial operation would do. That's what a normal service provider would do, and we're looking at that as well. More automation of systems. We're a highly automated authority, but there are still things we can do to improve that. And we're also looking at commercial opportunities where perhaps we can make investments that will bring in an income that currently we're not able to access. And workforce efficiencies are always there. On capital, we're in the process of Band A of the 21st Century Schools programme. We've just completed, or in September, the children moved into the new secondary school at Caldicott. The old school's in the process of being torn down at the moment, but that school is now up and running. That's some £44 million worth of school. And Monmouth is well on. That will open in September. So by then we will have two brand new state-of-the-art schools, absolutely crammed full of the latest teaching techniques and equipment. And that will enable the children to have the best possible start in those schools. We're moving on to Band B, and Band B will enable us to develop a new school for Abergavenny. King Henry is really showing its age now. It's in a worse condition than Chepstow. Chepstow, unfortunately, is having to wait until Band C. But that's the way that the funding comes. We have to follow the funding. We're not in the position to stump that money up ourselves. So the Welsh Government pay 50%. So yes, you can have an £88 million programme, but where do you get your £44 million from? Some of it will be from selling off assets, buildings that we don't need anymore, farms that are currently tenanted where people want to buy them off us. That's usually where the offspring of the tenant are actually running the farm now. They don't want to have to leave the farm when the tenant dies, which is often the case. They make offers to us and say, can we buy our farm? If the farm is non-core, as we call it, a core farm would be one with development potential. So if it's not a farm with development potential and the tenant wants to buy it off us, they can pay us the going rate for it. We're also looking to reprovision the Monmouth Pool and Leisure Centre. The old pool at Monmouth had to be taken away to enable us to build the school. We're going to provide a pool within the existing leisure centre now, and remodel the provision there. So that will be state-of-the-art leisure centre, and whenever possible, we'll be rolling that out to the other leisure centres in the area. To enable us to do that, we're having to look at a different way of running leisure centres, tourist information centres, youth services, and that's a system whereby we can take advantage of savings in VAT and business rates that will enable us to save sufficient money to keep those facilities going. The alternative taken by a lot of other authorities, of course, is to close them, and that's something that we really don't want to do. We have a core programme of some 5.5 million that covers highways and planned maintenance and disability facility grants, and more of that in a minute. And I mentioned county farms just now. So, as I was saying, Welsh Government provide us with 50% of the cost of these new schools, but the rest of it comes from the rationalisation that we're doing of our estate. What's in the pipeline? Well, at the moment we're working on the Abergavenny hub. That's the last of the towns to have the hub concept for its one-stop shops, and library provisions and various other things. The police are looking to come into them. This is where people go to one particular centre to access all of their facilities. And as I say, Abergavenny is the last one that we actually have to provide now. And there's a lot of work going on in the design stage of that. Last year, we increased the amount of our budget for disabled facilities grants on a one-off basis from 600,000 to 900,000. This year, we propose to repeat that, so we will be putting that additional 300,000 into disabled facility grants, so that people can have those adaptations to their houses that will enable them to stay in their houses for a lot longer than perhaps they would have been able to without those alterations. City Deal is a collection of the 10 authorities in South East Wales in the Cardiff capital region. The idea is that we work together on joint projects that benefit the whole region. So we may well do a lot of work. My colleague here, Peter Davis, lost about a year of his life working on getting a major facility that actually went to Newport, but there'll be such benefit to the residents of the whole area, because that's a major manufacturing facility and will attract a lot more industry with it. The idea is that if we achieve the necessary uplift in the economy of the area, or usually referred to as GVA, then the Treasury in Westminster will allocate up to 1.2 billion into the area, which will further enable us to regenerate. And there's all sorts of schemes in the pipeline that I can't talk about here because they're commercially sensitive, but everybody will be told about them when they come to fruition. And again, there's another reference to rationalising office accommodation. This is where I was saying that we do everything we possibly can to get rid of properties that we don't need, not only because we want to get people into one place, it's more efficient, there's far less travelling back and forth, and we get the capital receipt, which is ring-fenced to the schools programme. But we also get rid of the maintenance responsibility, which is quite substantial on some of these properties. For instance, you know, if we had enough money to go and do all the maintenance required on the properties that we own at the moment, that would take 22 million. Disability work, another 7.2. Roads would take 80 million. All of these figures we keep an eye on, we know where we are with it, but clearly certainly with the current funding in place, it's all very well to know about what our potential liabilities are, and we keep a very close eye on them and take action where we need to stop it getting any worse, but it would require substantially greater funding than we've currently got. Caldicott Castle, for instance, would swallow 3 million on its own, and that would just be to stop parts of it falling down. The alternative delivery model is what I was referring to when I said about finding different ways of running leisure centres, etc. It's clearly not just leisure centres, but the youth service and everything as well. That will enable us to keep those services going. And we will be, in addition to looking at transportation and our safety strategy, we will be reprovisioning the care facility that's currently at Seven View in Chepstow. That will be moving to Port Skewett in a purpose-built, dementia-friendly building with all the facilities that go with it. And we will be investing even further in our strategy to deal with additional learning needs for children. So the timetable for that is that we're going through these consultation sessions now. This is just one of a series. We will be going to public consultation in this way up until the end of January. The finalised budget, once we've seen what everybody has to say about it and finished our research work, will go to Cabinet in February and to a further meeting of all of the select committees, so members have the opportunity of having a real good look at it. And council tax setting will be on the 1st of March. So at that, I'll stop. I think we can probably take the live streaming off now, Leanne. And so it open. If you've got any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. And Peter's here with his laptop full of all sorts of information. So if I haven't got it in front of me, I'm sure Peter will.